Liberal Democrat spokesperson Paul Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I begin by thanking the Minister and commend him for his constructive engagement throughout the passage of this bill, both on the floor of the House, in committee and via the usual channels. Let me make clear from the outset my party supports the basic tenets of this bill. The Tories' ideologically driven decision to deregulate the bus network in the 80s allowed private operators to cream off the profitable routes. The policy paid scant regard to the many unprofitable, mainly rural routes, serving small communities, which, unless subsidised by an increasingly hard-pressed local government, were simply abandoned. Since 1985, as a direct consequence of their meddling, the number of bus journeys taken in this country has fallen by over 2 billion. A decline of almost 40%, with over 8,000 services cut or withdrawn altogether. In counties such as Shropshire and Devon, and across the country, from Cornwall to Caithness, entire villages lost daily services, with some areas reduced to one bus per week or none. The Bus Services Bill consequently represents a bold attempt to reverse that decline. If implemented properly, which will require more funding than currently on offer, it could be transformational, returning control over local bus networks to local communities. It will remove bureaucratic barriers to franchising, enabling local authorities to design routes, timetables, fares and branding that meets the actual needs of communities, whilst allowing profitable routes to cross-subsidise the unprofitable ones, rather than lining the pockets of big business. Opening up the possibility of a more reliable, integrated and affordable network, so crucial for rural and deprived areas currently facing steep service declines. Liberal Democrats want to ensure this legislation fulfils its potential by empowering local communities, protecting vital routes and driving the shift to greener, fairer transport. We know how important buses are to people's daily lives, and if this bill is to succeed, it must put passengers first. That is why my honourable friends and I have submitted so many amendments. Many, I acknowledge, will not be called for a vote. But even at this late hour, I ask the Minister to please cast his eye over them and see which ones he might still accept. It is worth highlighting that no fewer than 42 amendments were accepted at report stage in the Lords. 30 of them from the Government and a further 6 from Lord Blunkett, which the Government chose to support, after some intensive behind-the-scenes lobbying by my Lib Dem colleagues, who I'd also like to thank for putting forward amendments which we have retabled in this place, to address bus fare affordability, disabled passenger access, decarbonisation of the bus fleet, the protection of socially necessary routes. Of course.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, because the E5 bus servicing Langley Vale in my constituency has a woefully inadequate timetable and a route that doesn't stop at the local hospital. Local bus routes are simply not servicing my residents. Does the honourable member agree with me that this bill must tackle poor services and restore the £2 fare cap, reversing the devastating cuts, effective route cuts administered under the Conservatives?
Thank you for that intervention. These are exactly the issues this bill should address and could address if the Minister takes the bold steps we're asking him to do today. It is clear from its passage in the other place, this bill has been strengthened through constructive engagement across the political divide. If the Government has been willing to accept sensible proposals from their lordships, there is surely no good reason why equally sensible amendments tabled here in the Commons should not be adopted. One such sensible proposal concerns floating bus stops. Badly designed floating bus stops are a menace to the disabled, old and infirm, and in particular the visually impaired, which is why my party tabled new Clause 17, requiring the Secretary of State to not only conduct a review, but where necessary retrofit all current floating bus stops. While we also support the amendments tabled by the Honourable Member for Battersea and welcome the Minister's concessions on this issue. I will now address the 3 amendments we continue to press with most conviction before turning to the new clause proposed by my honourable friend, the member for Harrogate and Knaresborough. Our Amendment 10 addresses the scourge of headphone dodgers. This is not a trivial matter. Many passengers feel unsafe or uncomfortable when others play loud content on their devices without headphones, oblivious of those around them. This is not simply an irritation. It causes genuine distress to many trying to travel in relative peace and quiet, with over 75% of those who use public transport stating it disturbs them in a recent Savanta poll, and over 80% of people in a separate YouGov poll agreeing it is unacceptable.
Would the honourable gentleman give way?
I will.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. Does he agree with me that it's rather odd that these provisions apply to those that travel on trains and not to buses? And can he understand why the government makes this distinction?
Yeah.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. I agree entirely. We need a simple rule across all public transport. I also think it's odd the honourable member is making that point after his colleagues jeered me when I raised this first at PMQs a few months ago. But thank you for your support now. Our amendment would allow local transport authorities to introduce bylaws prohibiting such disruptive antisocial noise, and is a simple, practical measure that will make bus travel better for everyone. Some have argued such measures are illiberal. But liberalism, unlike libertarianism, is as concerned with responsibilities as rights. And my right to play loud content on my phone does not preclude my responsibility to not cause you unnecessary disturbance by failing to plug in my headphones. After all, that is why they were invented. When I first raised this issue at PMQs, as I've mentioned, the Conservatives and Reform, who aren't here, of course, jeered the suggestion. Although I cannot say whether or not the honourable member for Basildon and Billericay or other members of the opposition front bench on transport joining that chorus. And whilst the Prime Minister, in his extremely constructive answer to me, agreed it was a serious issue, his Labour colleagues on the committee voted down this amendment at committee stage, which the Tories, consistent with their previous hostility, also refused to support. Now, in a bizarre volte-face, the Conservatives have now tabled an amendment that mirrors our own, whilst the Shadow Transport Secretary has taken to the airwaves in recent weeks, demanding action on headphone dodgers, having miraculously seen the light, or at least heard the noise. Although whether this was from headphone dodgers or Conservative HQ focus groups, I will leave others to judge. Well, they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Despite their previous mocking and blocking, I am delighted to welcome our Conservative friends to the cause. I would ask the Minister to listen again, which might be a downside easier to do if this amendment is accepted and the headphone dodgers consigned to history. He will doubtless say, as he did in committee, that the bill already gives local transport authorities the ability to address antisocial behaviour. However, it doesn't explicitly reference the scourge of auditory disturbance, which is so serious a problem to surely merit the individual attention our clause provides. Empowering local transport authorities to create a bus environment that is safe, civil and comfortable for everyone. If the government is serious about improving the passenger experience, they, like the later arriving Conservatives, must surely come round to supporting this sensible Liberal Democratic policy, which, according to Savanta, is supported by a vast majority of the public, with only 13% opposed. Turning to new Clause 1, which would have reinstated the £2 bus cap. The government's recent decision to hike it to £3 represents a 50% increase that will drive people off buses and hit the most vulnerable in our society. I will indeed.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I absolutely support the reduction back on that price cap to £2. However, in my constituency of Harpen and Berkhamsted, where the Conservatives cut bus routes by more than 50% in the last decade, we're a place where actually people have to get several buses, and I have a couple who, when they go to the job centre, it costs them £12. Even though a price cap is in place. Don't we need a simpler structure and proper investment so that buses don't cost that much? Absolutely. Yeah.
These are indeed the issues we need to address, and I'm not addressing them at this moment. You're absolutely right. The poorest who use buses the most are already struggling with the cost of a living crisis. And no amount of spin can hide the fact this represents a huge fare increase, despite the Prime Minister taking to social media last month to proclaim he was putting working people first and that this fare rise would, and I quote, cut costs for working families. No, it will not.
Well, my right honourable friend give way. Thank you for giving way. In Torbay, Torbay is sadly one of the most deprived constituencies in the southwest of England. Bus travel is the primary form of public transport across Torbay. The £2 price cap was valued by both young people and those of working age to navigate Torbay. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the reinstatement of this will help oil the wheels of our communities, such as Torbay?
Thank you for that intervention. It is hugely important. If we want to get people back on the buses, if we want to help those most deprived in our society, we need to reinstate the £2 bus cap. Sadly, our amendment is not... fares have been risen to the point where many households simply cannot afford to use the bus regularly. A £2 fare cap would make a tangible difference for low-income families, students and modest earners, whilst also helping to reduce congestion and cutting emissions by getting more people out of their cars. Sadly, our amendment has not been scheduled for a vote, and thus we will be supporting the Conservatives' more modest proposal, requiring the Secretary of State to conduct an impact assessment on the ending of the £2 bus cap. Another clause that will not be voted upon is new clause 48, which would have provided free travel for uniformed police officers to provide greater assurance to the travelling public. Antisocial behaviour, not just headphone dodging, is on the increase across the bus network. The sight of more police officers on buses would only help reduce this menace. Currently, there's a patchwork of different schemes covering some, but not all, bus operators, requiring officers to produce a variety of different documentation to access free travel that is not infrequently denied. Our amendment would have provided a simple baseline requiring no bureaucracy, allowing every officer in uniform to travel freely on any bus. I would again ask the Minister to consider accepting this costless improvement to the safety of the bus network. I now turn to a hugely consequential cross-party amendment tabled by my Liberal Democrat colleague, the Honourable Member for Harrogate and Knaresborough, whose work on this bill has been thoughtful and persistent. His new Clause 2 requires the Secretary of State to remove time restrictions on the use of disabled concessionary travel passes. Has been supported not just by my party, but from MPs across the House, including from the government's own benches. Disabled passengers forced to travel at restricted times under current rules face unnecessary barriers to jobs, appointments and social inclusion. Removing time restrictions would allow them to use the bus network when they need it. It is right that the House should support this new clause. I warmly congratulate my honourable friend on bringing it forward. Rigid time slots reflect outdated thinking. Disabled people deserve travel choices that reflect real-life needs, whilst, if, as they claim during their ill-fated attempt to reduce PIP before recess, the government really wants to help more disabled people back into work, removing such restrictions would be a wonderful place to start. I'm delighted Mr Speaker has scheduled new clause 2 for a vote and would ask members from across the House to bear witness to the cross-party support it has already received by voting together in support of it. Hear, hear. Let me conclude by saying my party welcomes this bill, which will make a real difference to our bus network. But I call on the Government and the Minister to not allow petty party rivalry and tribalism to stand in the way of making it even more effective by voting against these sensible amendments and new clauses. Thank you.